Google's promising to solve the biggest problem right now with our voice assistants, and that is having the computer just understand us when we talk normally. Computers have trained us all to talk in a particular way, so you have to say a certain keyword and phrase your question perfectly in the right order. And let's be honest, it still doesn't always do what you want. But here comes Google announcing that its Gemini AI is going to get better at this on all sorts of Android devices. And apparently these updates are rolling out in a few months. So it's going to be embarrassing for Apple if Siri doesn't catch up with this very soon. Of course, that is if Gemini can really do what it promises. Let's go over where Google's Gemini AI voice assistant is heading next, along with how it compares to what Apple is promising. But even with Google's cool Gemini examples, there is one thing that still stands in the way of its success, and it potentially makes this whole update useless. I'm Bridget, and this is One More Thing. This week, the team at Google aired a brief video. It was called The Android Show, and it gave us a quick look at the biggest highlights to the Android 16 operating system and the Gemini AI assistant, and how it's going to be used on multiple types of Android devices. The presentation was refreshing because Google just got to the point. It wasn't too awkward or filled with people saying AI a million times. It just listed what Gemini can do for consumers in the real world, and it was written in plain speak. And that's fitting because plain speak seems to be the core focus of this upgrade to Gemini. The assistant, no matter if you use it on a phone or in the car, it should understand you in a conversational way when you're giving layers of instructions. Now, some of the most impressive examples involve sending hands-free messages with instructions that also involved language translation.
All right, message to mom saying, 해변에서 만나요, with a sunny emoji.
I think the biggest pain points of using a voice assistant are when you just need something to work when you're really busy, like when you're driving and you need to quickly find a bank or find a place to eat or get gas, and you do not have the mental load or the patience to carefully craft the right action words to the assistant, and you don't want to fumble with your phone. So in this example from Google, the user was getting directions already and just asked Gemini to find some good taco places along the way. And then you see they followed it up by asking more details about some of those restaurants. That all looked pretty good, but the Google blog post gets even more bold in its promises. Apparently, you should be able to ask Gemini to find the location of your kid's soccer game that got buried in your Gmail inbox. Now, I need to see exactly how that works because there are some real life things you need help with fast, and a quick voice dictation question and a quick answer about some address that's hidden in my email would do wonders. But I need to see this in action to believe it. The twist for all of this is how does it work in the real world and not just in the Android Show? The new features are going to start to roll out over the next month. So by the summer, we should really start to test it on phones. We have been here before, though, with Apple. The new Siri is supposed to help us find info in our messages or handle more conversational, multi-layered personal requests. But we are still left waiting on those promises of a better Siri. It's in the works. Before we get to those big promises, though, sometimes I just want the simple things to work. I want an iPhone that doesn't get confused on playing music because of how I happen to phrase a request about playing an Apple Music playlist. You know, these examples that we get in these tech presentations, they are always super smooth, but it's the real world stuff that will prove if we can use AI as a true assistant. We also need to explore questions of privacy. What are we sacrificing for the convenience of having it comb through my emails for an address? In the end, it always comes back to trust. If you're asking for an email, you want to make sure it's pulling up the right email. We also got examples on how you could just have a chat with Gemini. It's called live chat, and in the examples, I want you to look down below. There is fine print that says users should always check their results. And yes, Google will sometimes give a disclaimer to suggest that you should double check the results before making a big decision. Don't just rely on the Google Live Chat. But that all chips away at the usefulness of it, because why are you going to use a tool when you're not sure you can trust it? CNET sat down with Android President Samat and asked about those moments.
What we found is that consumers would rather have access to this technology and would rather use it where we can make it very safe, even though in some cases there are instances where you may need to understand there are limits.
Let's see how much it can really be relied upon, because if I'm driving and I need answers fast and it's getting things wrong when I need to be focused on the road, I am not the kind of consumer that will want to give it a second chance. We all might complain that Apple's taking a long time, but delayed is better than wrong answers. So I want to see how much we can rely on this new conversational Gemini. Having computers understand our voice and casual conversation is the big leap that I am waiting for. But some companies might be just skipping to the next stages. Google, for example, is also working on having AI that is tied to photo analysis. But you know what? Maybe we skip over the photos too and go straight to brain surgery. News This Week says Apple is working on ways for people to control devices with brain implants. Basically, it's mind control, and it has an interesting goal to help the disabled use devices. But before we have tech read our minds, I do hope we can make some useful progress this year on how it reads the tone of my voice. Let me know what's important to you in voice assistant commands, and if anything from the Android Show has you curious to try the next stages of Android and Gemini. And I'll catch you next time for one more thing.